from Michigan and tries to promote them as a valuable commodity. The value on the lake, right off the lake, I guess, of the whitefish that are harvested here went up from 40 cents a pound prior to this program to over $1.25 a pound today. So it tripled in value roughly based on the marketing and the handling of the fish in a way that improved their quality and made that quality consistent and valuable to other people. It's kind of a shame in a way. The other day I went out to dinner and I had Petoskey grilled whitefish from a restaurant. And then I looked at the small print, and the small print said, made from whitefish from Canada. Kind of disappointed me. Petoskey doesn't seem like it's a place in Canada. But there is great capacity for thinking of the seafood we can still produce today, that we historically produced, and that there is a big market for yet today. And obviously that has economic value. Well, thinking of this sort of a Sea Grant model, I think our program is unique because it tries to take applied sciences and use them to assist communities and support their education. The scientific work that we tend to undergo is really focused on environmental decision making, helping people make better decisions related to the environment. Assist communities in balancing their activities, so looking at environmental, social, and economic costs and benefits of what they do, and trying to help them work together to build sort of a consensus on what's a good way to go as far as future development, and how will that affect the quality of life, which is a big part of what the value of the Great Lakes is. We also support lifelong education about Michigan's coasts and the Great Lakes, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I want to talk about a specific research program because I think it exemplifies the kinds of things we're trying to do with local communities. Our research is mainly integrated assessment today, again thanks to Don. And integrated assessment really is an attempt to try to bring people together to solve their own problems, put the best existing science to help them make decisions, and then use that science to project what will happen in the future. I want to talk about Lake Huron because I think a lot of people don't hear much about Lake Huron. We just mentioned Saginaw Bay, and Lake Huron is really in pretty desperate straits right now. There have been major ecological and economic damages on Lake Huron due to the loss of alewife in 2002, the loss of Chinook salmon fishing pretty much right after that, and all of the recreation and tourism that's generated by salmon fishing has pretty much left the area. Different estimates of it, but something on the order of just charter fishing moving alone being something more than $19 million of lost revenue a year. So it's a major problem. It's kind of a sad one because on one side we're hearing all these stories about Asian carp and what's going to happen to the sport fishery of the Great Lakes if the Asian carp get in. Well, I can tell you that what's happened to the sport fishery of Lake Huron already is worse than our most dire projection of what will happen with the Asian carp. It is major change, ecological change, and it is the same kind of change that can happen in Lake Michigan and Lake Ontario if we don't take it into account soon. If we don't think of it in terms of what we're doing in our management plans related to fisheries, if we don't deal with those issues, they'll come back to bite us. And it will maybe matter not whether we have the Asian carp there or not if we don't take account soon. So what's happened in Sea Grant is that they've worked on this assessments of the local impacts, I guess, of these changes in the Great Lakes. And the first one was done in Northeast Michigan. The focus was on trying to help them plan related to their state parks on the coast, developing water-dependent businesses, and promoting ecotourism. And so an assessment was done. It involved university scientists and over 50 other partner organizations. These organizations would be local businesses, local governments, NGOs, and really trying to bring them together to come with some kind of a consensus of how ought this region to develop in a way that would be sustainable. From an economics point of view, one of the notable outcomes was over $400,000 of grants and other revenues have been brought into the area to implement some of the plans that were started, both in terms of education and in terms of things like building water trails and signage for parks and developing tourism activities. On the lower left there is sort of a map that shows one of the projections that this analysis did. And the projection was really, what is the land use pattern going to be like under high levels of building? What kinds of changes would occur now? And then the second graph over looks at sensitive ecological areas, like areas where birding is done or areas where fishing access might be, things that would promote ecotourism, and trying to look at those two in parallel so that as development occurs, it doesn't impair, but in fact enhances the use of those resources. So the attempt has been to bring the people together to think about what they have that they value and how they can promote it to other people as well as develop it in the future. Currently, Sea Grant's involved in a number of integrated assessments. Some of them are focused on the expansion of wind energy, which, as you know, is kind of a controversial issue in some areas. We think of it as potential for great growth. Many local people think of it as a potential damage to them. And to get them to think together about its positive and maybe potentially negative impacts and having an idea of what they really are is what these integrated assessments are about. We've got a couple dealing with river and brownfield restoration, other big projects that are going on. And then a third looking at southern Lake Huron now and the loss of Chinook salmon in the Thumb area and how that's going to influence local communities and what alternatives they might have. They probably don't have as much of the tourism opportunity that the, what do we call it, the Sunrise Coast has. We've always known that Lake Huron communities in general haven't had the economic development that the Lake Michigan communities have for a variety of reasons. If you thought of Lake Huron and you compared it to Lake Erie in Ohio, you would think of it as being a very valuable resource from a tourism point of view. But in fact, we don't tend to see it that way. And therefore, other kinds of activities like businesses and industries are going to have to make up that difference rather than maybe ecotourism. Sea Grant is involved in lifelong education to try to help people think about these issues. We develop online curricula for schools, approved curricula that can be adopted in schools, and we try to incorporate data that's collected on the Great Lakes into that program so that they're not just repeating what's known, but actually going out and analyzing data collected by different groups. We support hands-on experiences through our Great Lakes Camp and through our cruises on Lake St. Clair and the Detroit River, where we bring predominantly urban youth out on the water to show them about the great value and ecology of the Great Lakes. And we also get involved with teacher training in a number of ways, both online and all. I just want to talk a little bit about the future because I think the future still is one where we ought to be focusing on what could be what could improve Michigan's economy. And I want to focus a little bit on aquaculture. It's a pet area of mine. And aquaculture is the fastest growing commodity, agricultural commodity in the world today. And the state of Michigan has not taken any advantage of it at all. Other states have, other countries have, Michigan has not. Something like whitefish could be a perfect example of where we might be able to create an aquaculture industry that would have quite tremendous value. We have the water resources, we have the history as fish producers, as fishing, the local communities that could use economic boosts of this sort. And what we need to do is bring together members from the state to think about how could we develop aquaculture in a sustainable manner, in a manner where we aren't worried about the environmental impacts of it because we've cared for those in advance. And it's entirely doable. And it could be a fairly major industry for the state. Working waterfronts where industry can continue and public access continue and the value of the waterfront be there. So how can we make those things compatible? Because that's important in terms of keeping the quality of life that people want while trying to drive new economy. We're going to continue to work in interdisciplinary research, focusing on problems. And I should say that the problems that we have focused on have largely been identified by state agencies who have helped us think about what should our next study be. Why are we in Lake Huron right now? Because the Michigan DNR said this is a major issue that you ought to help us with. We can't handle it ourselves, but we would like your assistance in it. And we value being this sort of a neutral broker who can come in and try to provide information to help people make decisions.